making sporadic payments towards bad debts is only going to prolong the problem. So if I have a $500 medical collection, and let's say it's about 4 or 5 years old, and so they're calling me and they're saying, well, Patrick, you know, pay us something on this debt. If I just make a payment towards that debt, what I may actually be doing, because all bad debts, all collections only have a 7-year life on your credit report anyway. So if I make a payment towards that debt, I may actually be renewing that 7-year period of time. So I don't want to do that. So if I have a bad debt, there's only really 2 reasons I should pay it. And that's if I'm paying it in full to satisfy it, or if I'm settling for a lesser amount to satisfy it in full. Making any other type of a payment to a debt that's already a bad debt, I'm just prolonging how long it can stay on my credit report, which is not a good idea, because if it's a higher amount, you know, it becomes more of a burden. Maybe it's not realistic that I could ever actually pay it off. So if I had a $15,000 debt and I'm sending them $50 here and there, all I'm doing is keeping it on my credit report for a longer period of time. Not a good idea. Now, if I do settle on the debt, because, you know, ideally, let's say it's 6 years and 10 months. In 2 months, guess what? Under the Fair Credit Reporting Act, that debt has to come off my credit report no matter what. Whether I've paid it or not, it has to come off once it's been 7 years. Now, always save a copy of your credit report so that you can document the original dates, because it's not uncommon for creditors, for collection agencies to change those dates. Collection agencies will do that all the time. I see it all the time. So always save a copy of that credit report. But also just make sure that you're making the right decision in terms of if you were to settle on a debt. Keep in mind the forgiven amount is going to be taxable. You're going to get a 1099-C. You're going to have to pay tax on that as if it's a, you know, if it's real income. So maybe that's not that big of a deal on our $500 example. If I'm going to settle for $200 and they're going to forgive $300 and say it's settled for less than the amount due on the credit report. And when you do settle on a collection, or you pay a collection, always assume that they're not going to update your credit report properly. Never ever trust a creditor to update your credit report to reflect the way it should be reflecting. You need to check your credit report. You need to make sure it's correct. And if it's not, contact them or file a dispute with the credit bureaus. And always when you file a dispute with the credit bureaus, always do it with all 3 of the credit bureaus. And make sure you state what the error is. What is it about your credit report that is incorrect? You know, in that situation, if I've settled on the collection and they're still showing a past due amount, say, well, what is incorrect is that I have settled on this in full, and it should be reflecting a 0 balance in 0 past due and 0 owed. It doesn't mean that it gets removed from my credit report. Now, one thing I would always suggest is try to negotiate that. You know, say, I'll give you payment if you give me something in writing saying that you'll remove that from my credit report. Everything's always up for negotiation. But if I don't negotiate that out, they're not required to remove the collection just because I paid it. They're just required to update it to show a 0 balance. So keep that in mind. So, you know, if you've got debts you're prolonging, another consideration is, I had a client when this is years ago. He had about $250,000 in medical collections. That is a lot of collections. He felt it was the right thing to do because it was long story. I can't get into that, but long story short, he felt obligated to pay at least some of that back. So he was going to settle, and he was going to make payments on it, and he was going to essentially pay back about $30,000. And $220,000 would essentially be forgiven. Now, if he were to do that, he's going to be taxed. He should be taxed under the IRS code for $220,000 as real income if he received a 1099-C canceling that debt. Does he create a bigger issue by doing that? Probably. Is his better bet to sit down and look at all the options? Probably before he does something that can actually put him in a tax situation. So you definitely need to look at every single angle, and that is one potential angle is settling, even though it may sound like, oh, I'm going to settle for a much lesser amount, but all of a sudden if you've got a huge tax burden that's created as a result of it, that can be a problem for people. So be aware of that.